thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to talk with you about the books that you've been working on. And before we get to that, though, please share with our audience a little bit about who you are and how you came to write about space.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here with both of you. I am a writer. For about the last 30 years or so, I've been writing nonfiction. And prior to that, my training is in mathematics, and I was a high school math teacher for a while. And about 30 years ago, I decided to shift into a new career that had a little bit more time flexibility, so I could, interact with my youngsters and all. And I had always enjoyed doing research papers. I was the nerd in school who liked to do the research papers. So I sort of fell naturally into writing, and I kind of concentrated on engineering and construction for several years. And then when the new commercial space industry started evolving, and especially when New Mexico began building the world's first purpose-built commercial spaceport, it really reignited an interest that I'd had since I was barely a teenager, when I essentially grew up during the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo era. And it was such an exciting time to watch us send people to the moon and bring them home safely. So kind of reignited that, and I've been focusing on space topics since then. I write magazine articles, and for the last 15 years or so, I've been also doing books. So my last 5 books have been related to space and human space exploration.
So when you get about being inspired, and I saw that you did one on Wally Funk, and so how do you get your inspiration? Is it that there's one thing that you find fascinating that you decide to explore further, or is it a larger concept? How do you go from thought to book?
I have been bitten severely by the curiosity bug. And when I get curious about something, my natural inclination is go find a book to read about that topic. And when I end up hitting a wall and not finding a book that I can just read and learn about the topic, then I start digging out the information on my own, because I just won't give up. And then I become so enamored with what I found out that I just want to share it with other people. So then I end up with a book.
It's funny. We a friend of ours, and we interviewed her. She had come to me over the summer. She is kind of a metacognition person working with students, so she's definitely in the education field, but she has a love of space, and she has a grandson that she wants to provide educational children's books. And what she found on the topics of space, as far as what was available for kids' books, was very limited, and even what was there was more like a Dr. Seuss kind of rhymey, fun little picture book versus the actual information, at least here, what we have going on the Space Coast of Florida. So by meeting with her, that's exactly what you said. She's like, we're just gonna have to write it. And we have a couple of teams of kids who started to research, the ISS, but also SpaceX and the vertical landings in particular. Like, how do those happen? How do they come about? So I find it fascinating. I have to introduce you to Dr. Knowles, because she is looking for someone like you to do more kids' books for her grandkid that she can then promote to some teachers.
Yeah, every book I write seems to be of a different genre or a different type of book. And so the first children's book I did is a children's picture book, and it's a sort of a fictionalized version of an elementary school tour of Spaceport America.
Oh, she will. That'll be right up her alley. I just know that will. Yeah. I mean, I think when teachers, beyond just their content area, they're able to use picture books as a learning tool to augment and to scaffold those heavier concepts. So it's important that we have those.
Yes. I would like to ask you a little bit about the Mercury 13, and because you had just written about Wally Funk, and her trip came obviously way later than it should have. In your life with your studies, when you were a young person following the space program, were you aware of the Mercury 13, or did you only learn about them later in your adult life?
I only learned about them later when I was researching my first space book, which came out, oh goodness, 2011, I think. I one of the chapters in the book had to do with the physical exams that were given to the first astronaut candidates, the Mercury, who ended up being the Mercury 7. And that was done by Dr. Randy Lovelace right here in Albuquerque, where I live. And so then, of course, he's the one that did the follow-on study of giving the women pilots the same physical exams. And that ended up with the 13 women who passed the Mercury 13. And that's the first time I learned about them.
Right. I had met one of those ladies at the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs, probably around 2008. And I don't remember what her name, her name, I think is Rhea Waltman.
Yes.
Wonderful lady. And she ended up, flying the tow planes at the Air Force Academy to help train the cadets that were going to become pilots. She had a fascinating, just a wonderful lady. Right. And
These were
I'm
all
sorry,
just...
I'm sorry I only got to meet one of them, but in your life, had you met others other than Wally Funk?
No, Wally's the only one I've met. And in fact, there's only one other one besides her that's still alive. Rhea Waltman passed away, I believe it was last year. So they've been dwindling off. And Wally was by far the youngest of the group, and she's 82 now.
Well, as astronaut Wally Funk, is she as energetic in person as she appears to be?
Oh, yeah.
Interviews and can you summarize or speculate I don't know if it's cathartic, but what do you think she was feeling at that moment at apogee or when she hit the ground? Can you take a little author's liberty and speculate what might have been going on in her head?
Pure joy. She'd been working toward that goal for over 60 years. And to finally have that dream fulfilled was just an enormous thrill for her. And of course, as you mentioned, she's a very energetic person. And now she wants to go again. And this time she wants to go to orbit.
Well, right, because it's a little different than just going up there and to make it on that realm. When you get your books published, have you done it in the traditional fashion, or are you taking advantage of Amazon now? Or once you're finished with one, how are you handling that?
Well, most of my books have been done with traditional publishers, but small independent publishers. And but with Wally's book, decided to go a different route, and I went with what they call a hybrid publisher, who basically takes care of the publishing aspects of self-publishing. So this Wally's memoir is being published by Ingram Spark, and then the ebook version of it is published on Amazon.
It seems like a different world, nowadays with the advent of the technology where we are as far as how people go about getting published. And I think it's always maybe like a stone of concern for people when they want to get something. Which route do I go? Mm-hmm. And I mean, the one that we did on a CubeSat team, it was just, let's check out Amazon. But there's something to be said for the idea of being able to use a publisher. How do you find current publishers who are willing to be traditional, or even these blended models that are handling children's books or space in general?
Sometimes it's a matter of serendipity. In the case of Wally's book, the way I found that publisher was that Janet Ivy, who does the Janet's Planet show, contacted Wally and wanted to have her be a guest on that show. And one of the ways to contact Wally is through me. And so I met Janet, and then I was on her show, and then I was telling her that that we were working on Wally's memoir, and she said, "Oh, here's a publisher that just published my first book, and you need to talk to them." And it's turned out to be a wonderful partnership.
That's tremendous. And you've given me a great pivot. I met Janet Ivey for the first time in Huntsville, Alabama at an international space development conference, which helps us transition a little to your very well-known important roles within the National Space Society, because ISDC, of course, is a big conference that is sponsored by the National Space Society. Would you share a little bit with our audience about how you got involved with the NSS and what your roles are? Because I believe you have more than one sort of area of responsibility.
Yeah, the National Space Society is a great organization. And in fact, that ISDC that you mentioned in Huntsville was the first one I attended. When I was working on my first space book, I was, refamiliarizing myself with the space community, and came across the National Space Society and decided this was an organization I wanted to be part of. So I joined that. And one of the things that attracted my attention about them was the Space Ambassadors program that was going on at the time. And I thought, well, that's really cool. I love giving talks. The former teacher in me just won't quit. And I love explaining technical things in ways that non-technical people can understand them. And so I signed up as a space ambassador for NSS and competed in that program for a few years. And in 2016, I was named as one of the 5 finalists in that program, and gave a presentation at ISDC that happened to be in Puerto Rico that year. So it was really wonderful. And then after that, what we now call phase 1 of the Space Ambassadors program ended, then NSS decided they wanted to reorganize the program and start with a new version of the Space Ambassadors program. And so I was asked to serve on the subcommittee that developed and is operating the new Space Ambassadors program. So I'm involved with that. And I also write book reviews for NSS, both for their website and also for the Ad Astra magazine. And in fact, I wrote an article for Ad Astra that should be in the next issue. So those are my main involvements with NSS.
For our listeners, and we have been interviewing a few folks from National Space Society, can you just tell our educator listeners or just the population how one becomes an ambassador? What does that involve? What does it entail? How can they find out about it?
Well, it's the first requirement is that you be a member of NSS. So you join the organization, and then you there's a link on the NSS website that leads you to the Space Ambassador section, and you fill out an application form. And the requirements are that you, besides being an NSS member, that you read and accept the Code of Ethics and also the structure of the organization that you agree to participate in. And then that's called the applicant stage. And then we ask that to move on to the candidate stage, you put together a sample presentation that you would be willing to give to various audiences, and that we on the committee review that and make sure that, first of all, you know what you're talking about, and secondly, that it fits in with the mission of the National Space Society. And then you become a candidate, which is for a 1-year period. You're expected to give at least 2 presentations each year to continue as a space ambassador. And then once you have fulfilled that the requirements, then you move up to being a certified space ambassador, which is good for a 3-year period.
Awesome. Now, if I recall correctly, if we go back to the conference, the ISDC, for just a moment, Huntsville was the year there was a tornado close enough that they made us get in the center of the hotel.
Down in the basement.
Meeting Janet Ivey, I remember that. Are you involved with organizing the big annual conference, the International Space Development Conferences? Is that something you're actively involved with?
No, I don't. I haven't been involved with that in the past, at least. Although the year that it was in St. Louis, I did organize the author signing event that was part of that conference.
Yes. Am I right in remembering that next year it will be in outside of DC in Northern Virginia?
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Excellent. We're gonna, lobby for Orlando or West Palm Beach or Miami.
Yeah, make it easier
So,
for our kids.
Of course.
we can bring 100 students to a Florida destination. It's a
Well,
little bit harder.
Orlando is, of course, very appropriate.
Right. The last students we were able to take pre-COVID, we took at least, I want to say, a dozen students to Los Angeles. That was
Wonderful.
I think that was the last in person. We had our rooms booked for Dallas, but obviously the pandemic had other plans.
Right.
Are you active with a lot of with speaking of the pandemic, has a lot of your interactions gone virtual, and are you pretty active with virtual presentations of your work?
Yes, I've been very active in the past year and a half virtually. And it's just now, well, in about the last month or two, that I've been able to get back into in-person presentations. Of course, I always enjoy the in-person ones a little bit better because you get better interaction with the audience that way, but I'm completely comfortable doing virtual presentations as well. And it's turned out to be a real blessing in disguise, I guess, or a silver lining in the cloud, that it's really broadened the area that the space ambassadors can reach, because we're no longer limited to places that are easy to travel to and inexpensive to travel to. The space ambassadors don't get paid for their presentations, so we try and keep it simple.
I think in general, right, with COVID, with what we were doing, it became a moment of where you went, okay, we can either stop completely or we can learn to pivot. And how are we going to pivot to keep this going? And I think, just like what you said, it's been good, I think, for our kids to be able to see, okay, now we can't go face to face. Okay, let's write these technical papers. And then if these technical papers are accepted, and then we get invited, like we're going to Dubai for the IAC next week, right?
That's so
That happened
exciting.
from 2 years ago. So it really is about making sure that if you really love something, that you don't just give up because something changes. You find a way to do that. So it's almost like you said, it's been a blessing in some respects.
And
I
what
would
you
also
just
add,
said, I'm sorry,
I
Kevin.
I was just going to say, I would also add, it allowed us to take kids to get them involved in conferences that they may not have been able to travel
Or
to.
afford to travel to.
We presented papers in GLEX in Russia, in Australia, with COSPAR, with, and things like that. So, and even the NSS last year, well, our kids were able to observe, to watch the video feeds every day and things like that. So absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and I think you might know Frances DeLutri too.
Yes.
She does a great job with the debate the SPUN debates. I help her coordinate the debate coaches for that. And our students are able to not only, think about space, not only from the CubeSat, factor, or just talking about space policy, but rather about a global perspective. And so that whole universalization argument that comes up through her stuff has been great for our students. They've been able to meet students from around the world and recognize that ultimately, as we, venture out into the next settlements of the future, it will be with different countries and cultures.
Mm-hmm. Very important.
So for our students who really love the writing aspect of and the presentation parts, what advice would you have for some of our young authors about, taking those ideas and really spreading, getting them into some kind of publication? How would you advise my students?
Well, the first thing is to focus on topics that you really care about, because writing a book is a big commitment of your time and energy. And it's something that you have to be excited about enough to stay excited about it over an extended period of time. And the other thing is to be sure that you're not duplicating something that's already out there. It has to be something that will draw people's attention and be something new and different. If it's either a different topic that hasn't been addressed, or you're taking a topic that other people have written about, but doing it in a way that is very different, analyzing it in a different way or bringing new insight or information to it.
I have a couple, I love it. Be passionate about your subject and be distinctive, right? The
Right.
advice you just gave sounds like what I tell my science fair kids. If you don't love your topic, you are probably not going to do a good job on it. And
Exactly. And if you don't love what you're writing about, people won't enjoy it either. It won't be interesting to them either.
right. Forgive me for diverging a little into pop culture, but in sci-fi. But I often ask people of my generation or so, Star Wars or Star Trek, were you a fan when you were a kid? Please elaborate.
Um, I guess I'm more familiar. Well, I guess I have a little familiarity with both of them, a little more familiar with Star Trek. I've never really been deeply interested in science fiction, been more the science fact aspect of
Right.
it. But I do enjoy good science fiction. The Martian is one of my very favorites ever.
You're right. That's hard to beat. In fact, I used the quote at the end of that movie about where he's talking to the new candidates about, you know, space will kill you and you're going to have trouble, but you got to keep working the problems. And I actually try to use that and tweak it a little for my students in their academic studies about you just keep solving the problems and that whole eat the elephant one bite at a time. I like that.
Yeah.
I want to share with you, Mike, there's a show out. It's called For All Mankind. Have you heard about it?
I have heard about it. I haven't watched it yet. I know I need to.
It is my daughter who was Air Force in space and Air Force recommended it. It's an alternate history where the Russians, the Soviets beat the Americans to the moon and all of the consequences of that. It's I've heard some good things. I watched a little bit, but it seems like it might be worth at least checking out because of I'll only share one scene outside the astronaut building. There's a row of Corvettes, which I know those guys in the Apollo days, they were all, drag racing Corvettes, apparently.
Well, that was more the Mercury era, but yeah.
Yes.
Well, I know that we've already asked the question about advice to inspire our authors, but as a final question, I'd like you to maybe think back to when you were a teacher, right? And we have teacher listeners as well as parents. What would you say to the math teachers, the science teachers of today about how we inspire the future engineers, astronauts, or settlers?
Well, we come back to the personal excitement in the topic. If you don't convey your own enthusiasm and excitement for the topic, then nobody else is going to be interested in it either. And looking at current examples of technology developments, for example, in the space realm, that's how you show the relevance and the excitement of it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of times teachers feel stuck in a classroom and they've got these standards they have to follow and curriculum that they're told to, meet the test and all of that. But the more, I've worked with Kevin and granted, we're in a private school, so it's afforded us some different opportunities that I didn't have when I was in public school. But even there, to make sure that you are not sticking to those four walls, that you find a way as an educator to be involved outside in organizations, to almost see yourself as an edupreneur, I think is what they call it now, the idea, right, of the combination of the two, so that you can bring experiences to your students that they wouldn't otherwise experience it just by looking at a curriculum content. So,
right.
So my last question for you is, let's say we get our podcast into the ears, or Jeff Bezos watches our YouTube channel and he sees our podcast. Why should Miss Loretta Hall be side by side with Wally Funk when she goes on her second ride to space? And is that something that you would do if you were afforded an opportunity?
Yes, I would. And why should I be there? Well, again, I guess two things. It would be a personal thrill for me, but it's also would would give me the opportunity to share that excitement, that experience with other people, because I could translate it into written form.
That's the right answer.
Yeah,
right?
that's a good answer.
It's
Jeff, are you listening?
I know, please. Like we'll try to share with as many people as possible. You too. We'll get you up there.
It's like that movie, The Red Planet. They had an engineer, he scooped up some dirt or rocks on Mars, and he said they should have sent an artist, because the scientists and engineers often they can't convey they're too clinical to
Yes.
but an artist like such as yourself, you're the creator. So you're definitely a creator of content. Miss Loretta Hall, we want to thank you for taking some time out of your day and just sharing a little bit with us. I really enjoyed it.
Man,
I appreciate you letting me into the ambassadors. I'll try not to let you down on that. We
You've done
look
a great
forward to
job.
hopefully seeing you in person at an international space development conference in Northern
Hopefully
Virginia.
next year.
That will be
Yes.
happening, I believe, May or June of 2022.
Yeah, I've lost track of the dates myself, but yeah, it'll be in the springtime, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
thank you.
Thank you.